The president wants to spy on 200 million Americans without a warrant. Has he read this document, which he was sworn to uphold?
Now, I will not have you libel Abraham Lincoln.
I don't understand the problem with registering guns. We register cars.
Mark Levine brings you the news the government doesn't want you to know.
Today, an explosive story about connections between white supremacists and Islamic terrorists.
When there's a conflict between Scalia's conservative values and the Constitution of the United States, he throws away the Constitution.
When we do have secret prisons, that is not what America's all about.
Let's go to Mark in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Good evening, America. Welcome to the Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Mark Levine. Congress and the president are at it again, trying to decide how we should have the mix of tax increases and cuts in spending so as to not go over the fiscal cliff. Of course, President Obama and the Republicans have been fighting on this kind of issue really pretty much all of his first term. How much of it will continue into his second term? We're going to address that question first with my guest, Mike Lane, Republican strategist. Then we're going to move on and talk about some other things going on in Washington. Should the filibuster be reformed? And what do we think about the United States Supreme Court decision that could make the difference for same-sex marriages nationwide? We've got people like Jim DeMint leaving the Senate to become the head of the Heritage Foundation, and a right-to-work question in Michigan, whether or not Michigan should really be able to punish those unions. All of that's going on here abroad. There's, of course, always problems in the Middle East. But in Egypt, something strange happened. The Egyptian president slash dictator slash president again seems to have come back a little bit on his decree. The Egyptian people seem to have won a victory here. We'll talk about what that really means for the future. And then Syria. It looks like the rebels in Syria may finally prevail. What's happening next, and what should the United States do? Mike, there's a lot on our plate tonight. Let's start with right here in Washington, the fiscal cliff. That's what everybody's talking about. Let's face it. That's what your party's talking about. That's what my party's talking about. The consensus in Washington seems to be that we got you this time. That the fiscal cliff, frankly, nobody likes it, but we Democrats, we wouldn't mind going over it as much as, let's face it, you Republicans would. And so we say, look, President Obama won the election. The one thing that we know he ran on was increasing those rates for those top earners. He'll get that, and then once he gets that, we can compromise about some of the other things. What do you think?
Well, I think you're right, Mark. It's less fearsome to you than it is to me. You get three things if we go over the fiscal cliff. Number one, you get huge across-the-board tax increases, which is something the Democrats really want. The second thing is you get huge cuts to the defense budget, which is something the Democrats really want, and you're willing to pay for that with $600 in discretionary spending cuts on the domestic side. Well, I think you're right. It's less obnoxious to you than it is to us.
We definitely don't want the end of unemployment insurance. We do think that people who are long-term unemployed need that money to survive. That one hurts. And we, of course, strongly support payroll tax cuts and middle-class tax cuts, both the 2% on payroll tax that applies to every American, and the Obama tax cut, which is, I think, what you need to call it now, the one that affects 98% of Americans. Actually, take it back. It affects 100% of Americans. Under the Obama plan, every American gets better tax rates, better taxes than under the Clinton years. Even the super rich, even a millionaire saves $12,000. So once we go over the cliff, then we come in January 5th and we see everybody gets a tax cut. Everybody. The middle class gets the same taxes they had before, and the rich get $12,000 less. Everybody wins. Obama's ready. The Senate's ready. Will the House sign that bill?
Mark, if we go over the cliff, nothing's going to happen in January. The atmosphere will be so partisanly poisoned on both sides if we go over the cliff that any imagination that, okay, we did it, now we're scared, now we'll be able to come back and fix this relatively quickly, I don't think is going to happen.
So you're saying that if we reaches January 2nd, suddenly the Republican Party will be against tax cuts. The Democrats will propose a tax cut for every single American, and the Republican Party will say, no, we're against tax cuts unless you give billionaires a special break.
No, I didn't.
That's going to be your party's position?
No, I didn't say that we were not going to find an accommodation. What I said was that it's not not going to happen relatively quickly if we go over the cliff. It's going to be a long, involved, drawn-out process. And you know what, Mark? When you look at what's going around the world, look, they're back into recession in Europe. They're back into recession in South America.
China.
We are headed back into a recession. With or without the cliff, we're headed back into a recession.
Well, actually,
and I don't see any way out of it. So
the last unemployment numbers, I think you know, are down to the
disastrous.
7.7%. They're the lowest they've been since Obama became president.
And how did we get to 7.7%? Because another 500,000 people got so discouraged they dropped out of the workforce and don't count anymore. Is that the way we want to lower unemployment?
Consumer confidence is the highest it's been since Obama became president. Housing prices are back up. Manufacturing is back up. The economy is looking good. Look, I don't want to go over the fiscal cliff, but I think I recognize that at the end of the day, if you never pay back these deficits, right? I mean, Republicans used to care about deficits.
And we
still
do.
Used to be the fiscal conservatives, right?
We are.
So now, all we're saying is have the rich pay their fair share. And Republicans are saying, you know what? We prefer that the entire economy go into recession. We want every American to take a tax increase. You're saying that on January 2nd, the Republicans will be against a tax cut for all Americans?
Mark,
really?
You have to be consistent here. We just agreed that it's the Democrats who want to go over the cliff, not the Republicans. And now you're telling me that it's the Republicans who want to go over the cliff.
No.
We have to be consistent about what your argument is. You can't just turn me in circles.
My argument's very simple. Once we go over the cliff and the rates automatically go up for upper income people.
For all people.
For all people.
No, we're not going to divide America. We're going to treat everybody the same. Everybody gets, the same
Why do we
treatment.
treat everybody the same as they did in the Clinton years? Compared to the Clinton years, Obama wants to lower rates for everybody.
If we do
now, Bush, you remember, didn't just want those tax cuts. They want more than $12,000 for everyone that earns over $250,000. Obama would provide a tax cut for everyone. The Republican plan is to give a tax cut for everyone and all kinds of additional goodies for millionaires. All Obama's saying is get rid of the goodies.
Mark, the Obama plan is to suck money out of the economy and create a drag on investment that will create a drag on economic expansion, will create a drag on government revenues,
now you're
and
on
will
both
result in another recession. Look, you can't suck money out of the economy and give it to the non-productive government. It needs to be invested in the private economy, where people invest in their future, where they invest in job creation, where they invest in creating things and manufacturing things and creating economic wealth. That's what people who have money do, whether they're rich or poor. They invest it. When you take that money out of the productive private sector and give it to the non-productive government sector, you're reducing economic expansion, you're reducing job creation, you're reducing revenues to the government.
Now I think you're arguing on both sides, Mike. Are you saying the deficit is a problem or not?
Absolutely. The deficit is the single most important problem we have today.
So we have to fix the deficit, but your idea is that the middle class should pay for the deficit, not the rich. That you think the rich have it too hard, but poor people, homeless people, they need to chip in more, and the 10% that Mitt Romney has to pay, that's sufficient. Really hit his janitor, make him work harder.
No. What I'm saying is that the only way we're going to get out of these trillion-dollar deficits that Obama has created is through economic expansion. There's not enough money among rich people to tax to get it back.
Because I remember in the Bill Clinton years, it seems to me that we had massive surpluses.
No, we had economic expansion as a result of the economic expansion policies of the Gingrich Congress. That's why we had those surpluses, Mark.
I seem to recall,
when you start taking that away and you start creating a drag on investment and a drag on economic expansion and a drag on job creation, then you get sucked into the downward spiral vortex, and that's where Obama is taking us.
Here's the thing, Mike, and I know you believe what you're saying.
I absolutely believe what I'm saying.
But here's how I think you can look at it in an objective way.
Government doesn't create jobs, and government doesn't invest. Those are just two truisms. Government does not create jobs, and government does not invest.
Really, because I think that people in the military have jobs. I think people in the police force have jobs. I think teachers have jobs. I think people who build bridges have jobs. Government creates lots of jobs.
The bridge builders are private sector people. They are
hired by the government, by government funds.
No, they're hired. They're not hired by the government. They're hired by a private company who gets a contract to build a bridge.
From the government. Who builds our roads? Who builds our bridges?
Private companies, road building companies, Mark, not the government. The government does not create the jobs.
Who pays for it? We do. Taxpayers, the government. And that's government spending. That's Obama's stimulus package to build bridges and roads.
We just went through an entire expansion of the Beltway right in our area.
And I guarantee you there were more jobs.
And guess who built it? The private sector.
Well, that's true right here. That's true. The private sector built a tollway that's a rich man's tollway. It's something
Mark, it's 25 cents to ride. It's not a rich man's tollway.
Listen, in traffic, there's no reason to pay 25 cents if there's no traffic. If there's traffic, it's going to cost $10. The point is, the government has built the vast majority of our infrastructure. Right. You know that. Look. Interstates and bridges, because you can give me one toll road outside of on the Beltway. If that's your future, where every road is a toll road, where every time I take a right-hand or left-hand turn, I stick a quarter in the meter.
No, there are public services that the government should rightly provide, and transportation is one of them.
That's
I absolutely
right.
agree.
And there are jobs created by
But those are
government.
public services. They are not job creation programs. The private sector is the one that creates jobs, Mark. You know, we don't want a government.
A public school teacher, that's not a job?
A private school teacher is a job too, isn't it?
How about a policeman? How about a military?
Private security force,
private militia?
You know what?
Halliburton, right?
Mark,
that's your idea of a military?
Let's go right to our Constitution that we both love.
I got it right here.
Protecting the safety and security of the United States with a strong military is one of the enumerated powers of the federal government.
You know what it is?
You betcha we want that.
You know what it is? It's a government job. Just don't say silly things like government doesn't create jobs. You know government creates jobs. They do it directly, and they do it indirectly by hiring people to create jobs. That's a truism. Now, you may argue the private sector does it better than government. We can have that argument, but don't say the government doesn't create jobs. Come on.
A pittance. And the government has too many jobs now.
I had a government job. I worked in the House of Representatives.
My condolences. You know, the House of Representatives is overstaffed by about 50%. You know, if we could get rid of half the Capitol Hill workers, we'd be a lot better off.
And you'd get rid of public school teachers and police and
No, I would not get rid of
and
public school teachers.
They're hired by the government, though. That's not a real job.
Education is a function of government.
All right, okay, I'm glad to hear it. I'm glad to hear you support government
Education
jobs.
As public safety is a function of government.
We don't disagree. I just didn't, when you said government didn't create jobs, I just wanted to make sure that...
Talking about the grand picture.
The grand picture?
The grand picture.
Okay, the New Deal didn't create jobs? Franklin Delano Roosevelt didn't create jobs?
For the money we wasted compared to the jobs created, it was pathetic, and it created a drag, and it extended the Depression longer than it otherwise would have.
If you want to argue the private sector does it more efficiently, that's a different argument. It depends, frankly, on the job. When it comes to health care, we know, for example, the government does it more efficiently. Medicare has a 3% overhead rate. Private insurance companies have a 20% overhead rate. So that means the government is 7 times more efficient than the public sector in health care.
And
when it comes to providing hamburgers, you're right. I'll leave that to the private sector.
Why are doctors no longer taking Medicare patients? Because the government has so screwed up that program and is so stiffing the doctors in terms of what they're supposed to get for caring for a patient. Mark, don't turn 65 or 68 when you get there, because they're not going to take you as a Medicare patient.
There are a lot of doctors that still take Medicare patients.
Fewer and fewer by the day.
I'm not really worried about that one.
I would be if I were you.
If you want to join this discussion, this fierce debate, we'd love to hear your voice as well. Just call it at 571-749-1166. 571-749-1166. You can join in. You can agree with Mike. You can agree with me. You can disagree with both of us. But we definitely want to hear your voice. When we come back, we'll get to Mike and me. We're going to see if we can come to our own solution on the fiscal cliff. And if we can't, well, I guess that'll just mirror what's going on in Washington. Then we'll move on to the other things, the Supreme Court, the filibuster, and what's going on abroad. All of that when we come back right after.
This is firstgov.gov, where we're obsessed with getting you government information.
Brand new student loan applications on the site, baby. This calls for a celebration. Where's your uncle?
So in the end, it was either take the astronaut gig or come work here. What can I say? Duty called.
Dude, that's my cop.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. No, I'm pretty sure that's Sam's cop.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. No. Sam's. No.
Just log on or email us and get what you need.
C, change of address form. That's how it's done.
D, driver's license renewal.
E, emailing social security information.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Nice, we'll allow it. All right,
What are those?
Government surplus cars for auction.
You posted those online last time.
No, you did.
I'm posting them online this time!
For all your government information, firstgov.gov.
Oh, what have we got here? Sometimes you feel tired. You can't seem to lose those extra pounds off your midsection. And your joints hurt when you take the stairs. Well, you're getting older. But I'm happy to say that there's some simple things we can do to keep you happy and healthy for years to come. We can also lower your risk for some serious diseases the older population is often subject to. Proper nutrition is more important than ever. Your body has changed, you know. Not as many treats. A basic exercise plan, lots of walks and fresh air, and most importantly, come and see me for twice-yearly checkups to help ensure the best possible quality of life. Now, how does that sound? Good boy.
Improve the quality of life for your elderly pet. Schedule twice-yearly checkups that include preventive care and regular lab work.
Inside Scoop, I'm your host, Mark Levine. In Washington, there is a fierce battle. Should we go over the fiscal cliff? What is the fiscal cliff? Well, the fiscal cliff is the fact that a lot of things happen come January 1st, 2013, baked into the law based on things that prior Congresses and prior presidents have done. The main thing that happens is we go back to the Clinton-era tax rates. That would raise taxes on everybody. And at that point, President Obama wants to keep the taxes low for 98% of Americans and actually give a tax cut from the Clinton-era rates for all Americans. But Republicans are insisting on special things for the top 2%. Also, unemployment insurance ends at the end of January 1st, 2013. And we also have spending cuts. There would be about $600 billion over 10 years from defense, $600 billion from domestic discretionary programs, about 9% in spending. And what else? Alternative minimum tax ends, the doctor's fix ends. There's a whole bunch of things that happen. Will Congress work it out? That's my question for Republican strategist Mike Lane. So Obama has said, look, let's just do two things right away, get this done before Christmas, we can work out the rest afterwards. One, let's make sure that 98% of Americans, Republicans claim they don't want to raise taxes on those that earn under $250,000. So let's just fix that.
No, actually Republicans claim they don't want to raise taxes on anyone.
Right, so everyone agrees, Obama and the Republicans agree not to raise taxes on those that earn under $250,000, and Obama and Republicans disagree on whether those who earn over $250,000 should pay more, not on the first $250,000, to which Obama agrees they get $12,000, but on every dollar earned over $250,000. That's what they disagree on. So Obama says, let's just get this piece done that we both agree on, and then we'll fight about the other piece. Why should 98% of Americans be held hostage to the 2%, particularly when the election was largely fought over this point and Obama won?
Well, you know what? It's Obama who's holding the 98% hostage. If he would agree to the status quo, we don't need to change anything. Let's just go with the status quo on taxes until we come to a grand agreement on that, then that would be perfect. Why change 2%? When you can just go with the status quo, especially when the changes that Obama wants aren't going to, they're going to put like an 8% dent in the,
That's right. It's about 8%.
8%. It's just.
It's a start. It's a start, but the American people voted for this.
But the spending problem. No, I don't think they did.
You're not disputing that Obama ran very specifically on this specific point. I mean, you could argue about a whole bunch of things. On this, he was very clear.
I don't think that. I do not think that the people who elected him on the sole issue of increasing taxes.
But he ran on this issue, no question.
Yeah,
of course he did.
Sure.
And not only that, but polls show.
And a majority of the House of Representatives ran on the issue of not increasing taxes. So why should they be required to disavow and ignore their constituents who elected them on the same thing?
I'll tell you why. Because polls show the majority of Americans strongly support this. The smallest poll I've seen is 63%. I've seen it as high as 72%.
Mark.
Not just Democrats and independents, but even a majority of Republicans support this, and even they took a poll of millionaires.
Mark,
and 55% of millionaires think they should pay more taxes.
Well, they can. Let them send it into the Tax Me More fund.
Tax
it's
them
there,
all.
perfectly
Tax
good.
Them all.
But why should the 55% of the members of the House of Representatives who campaigned on not raising anyone's taxes be required to knife their constituents in the back who elected them on that particular issue?
Well, I don't think they elected them on that particular issue, and I'll tell you why. As you know, more Americans voted for Democrats than Republicans in the House of Representatives. If you simply add up all the votes for Democrats in the House and all the votes for Republicans in the House, the Democrats won. Now, admittedly, your party took control of state legislatures in 2010, drew those very carefully gerrymandered lines according to district lines, and in states like Pennsylvania and Florida and Ohio, blue states or purple states, you've got like Republican delegations that are 70% because of the way you drew the lines. But the majority of Pennsylvanians support it, even if the majority of Pennsylvanians in Congress don't. The majority of Ohioans support it, the majority of Florida. In fact, I don't think there's a single state in the United States where the majority of people don't support this. Why can't we just agree on this? And then once this hard work is done, we can move on. I have to tell you something. I think you're pushing back. I think your party's going to crack on this one. I really do.
Where's my negotiating strategy? If I give you everything that you want now, and then we're going to come back and address my concerns tomorrow.
That's a fair point.
Obama's kidding, isn't he?
That's a fair point.
No, just kidding.
No, that's a fair point. And I think that President Obama is waiting for a counteroffer from the Republicans. Now, Boehner gave an offer.
Which he got?
Well, let's talk about Boehner's counteroffer. His offer was, I think it was $800 billion in unspecified cuts in Medicare. Am I getting my number right?
I think it was $800 billion in revenues.
Well, $800 billion in revenue, right? That's true. And Obama wants $1.6 trillion. And they'll probably come down to something in the middle, $1.2 trillion. I have to say where I think this is going to come down.
It's going to come just under $1 trillion. Just not 999 million, 909. It's going to be just under $1 trillion.
Maybe so. I think it's going to end up, and you and I may agree on this, at the end of the day, on the tax cuts, I think it's going to end up some tax rate higher than 35 and lower than 39.6, and a limitation on deductions to make up the difference. Isn't that where we're going to end up? I don't know, it'll be 37 or 38. It'd be something like that with maybe a max deductions of 20,000 or 50,000. So some combination of the Romney idea, some combination of the Obama idea. That's where we're going to end up, on the top 2%, and the other 98% are going to get the tax cut.
I think Republicans would probably go for that, depending on how high it went up. I don't think the president will go for that. I think the president smells blood, and he's being more political than governing, and I think he's going to go for the jugular on this, and I think we're going to go over the cliff because of it.
I think if we got 38%, along with enough of deductions capped to carry over the difference between 38 and 39.6, I think Democrats will be happy with it. The goal is to tax the wealthy and make them pay their fair share. Whether it's done through rates or deductions, that's not our issue.
Mark, what is a fair share? I mean, I
think the Clinton era is a good example, because in the Clinton era, they paid these high rates, 39.6, and not only did the rich get richer, they got very rich in the Clinton era, but the middle class and the poor got richer too. It's something where we can all share.
Here's what I think is fair share.
Okay.
I'm not totally opposed to a progressive income tax, although I think a fair tax is a lot better way of doing it than a progressive one. However, I see absolutely no reason when you combine payroll taxes, sales taxes, income taxes and state taxes and things like that. I see absolutely no moral justification for anyone paying more than 25% of their income in taxes to the government at all levels.
Except they have since 1930.
Right, and it's immoral.
Or so.
It has to stop.
It's been going on for 82 years.
And it's got to stop.
And you know what? We have a government very different from the way it was in the 1920s. We do have Social Security. We do have Medicare. Those are separately funded. We can talk about those. That is the payroll tax.
No, but that's part of the taxes that you pay.
But we also have a military. We didn't have this military around the world in the 1920s. We were pretty isolationist in the 1920s. You want to take us back to a level of spending we have not seen since the 1920s. And you're not going to succeed. Ronald Reagan did not succeed. What did Ronald Reagan do? He cut taxes. He didn't cut spending very much, and we started with massive deficits. Your party always claims they want to cut spending. They never actually do.
You know what, Mark? Here's the reality. Ronald Reagan actually signed the largest tax increase then in the history of the United States in 1986.
That's correct.
And it led to recession. So let's not,
wow, I've never heard a Republican criticize Ronald Reagan before. This is the first for me.
He was an 89% good guy,
Look, the heart of the issue, and so I think actually I think there is room for compromise on this tax rate. Like you said, I think we agree, somewhere between 35 and 39.6, some cap on deductions. I actually think there's room there. We may argue about 37 or 38. I think there's room there. Let's talk about on the spending end, because during the election, you and Romney supported. Go ahead. One more thing on taxes.
Let me underscore that the magic number for the aggregate, no matter where you get it from, the magic number is a penny or $1 under $1 trillion. That's the magic number. It's not 1.2. It's not 1.4.
For tax increases on the rich.
It's under $1 trillion.
Okay. So
No. It's not tax increases on the rich. It's revenue increases to the government from no matter what source it'll be.
So tax increases. Period. Well, we don't want to raise them on the 98% earning under 250,000.
You actually do want to raise them on the middle class, but that's another argument.
No, we don't actually. Well, we can talk about whether it's a good idea or not. Okay. So let's talk about the spending side. First of all, it's very important that people recognize, and I think they do, that Social Security and Medicare are separately funded from the federal income tax stream. And payroll taxes that you were complaining about, that you think they're too high, rich people don't pay payroll taxes.
I think they're
right.
Well, they do. Yes, they do.
No, because they're capped at 113,000 or so.
Because they don't get the benefit, Mark. Why would you tax somebody to the point where they would be getting a benefit of $3-4 million a year when they're not getting that benefit?
I'm taxed all the time on things I don't get the benefit from.
Social Security is, well...
I don't get a benefit from the corporate subsidies to oil companies. I don't get a benefit from the corporate subsidies.
Yes, you do. You get cheaper energy,
No,
which is
I don't.
very
All the
important.
money goes to their pockets. No, I don't get cheaper energy.
You can invest in oil companies and you can get dividends from them, but no, you get cheaper energy.
I thought you wanted private stuff separate from the government. You want government-run oil companies.
No.
You just don't want government-run public school teachers.
No, I actually think we should get rid of all those deductions corporate-wise.
We agree on that.
And dramatically lower the corporate tax rate.
We agree on that.
As I think we need to lower the personal tax rate down to 25%.
Let me bring up my point, though, on Medicare, because Republicans are saying we might make a deal. Many of them are saying that they would agree to some increase in the top tax rate.
Let's just say yesterday, Dick Durbin was on Meet the Press, and he said absolutely not an entitlements, not going to happen. No way are we even going to look at this. Dick
I
Durbin,
understand that.
number 2 guy in the Senate.
I like Dick Durbin. I'm a big fan of Dick Durbin. But I want to go to your party's argument, which is that we're willing to increase the revenues. We can argue whether it's 800 billion or $1 under $1 trillion or 1.2 trillion. But we'll do it if we get something on entitlements. They want something on entitlements. This is your party's argument,
no,
correct?
We want something on spending. And we
I've heard
need to
entitlements
stop,
because Obama's already willing to cut on spending.
But we've got to cut $10 trillion out of spending. So you can't do that without looking at entitlements.
Wait, $10 trillion out of spending?
Over 10 years.
Over 10 years.
Yes.
And $1 trillion out of taxes over 10 years?
That's a good number.
That's never going to happen in a million years, and you know it. All right. I think 1 to 1 is about the best you can hope for. But here's what I've heard from the Republicans. In their proposal, the one that Boehner proposed, he said, we want to cut $800 billion from Medicare. That's in his proposal. You've read that, right?
I have not actually read his proposal, but I'll grant you some leeway at this point.
That's what he said. What he hasn't said is specifically where those cuts come from. And my point is this. Romney argued in the election, you personally argued with me in the election, you complained about the $716 billion that Obama and Paul Ryan, by the way, had already cut out of Medicare. This was classic waste because it wasn't going to beneficiaries. This was going to extra hospital costs and insurance costs, and none of it was harming beneficiaries. But your party, and Romney in particular, complained all the time, Democrats are cutting Medicare, run seniors, Democrats are cutting Medicare. Now, the Republicans have flipped on a dime. The election's over. A month after the election, now they're saying you're not cutting Medicare enough. I believe that this is the true Republican Party, the one we're seeing now, and the one before the election, that was a fraud.
Mark, look, here's what we need to do. We don't need to reduce benefits for anybody who's a needy recipient of any of the social safety net programs. What we need to do is we need to means test it so Warren Buffett and Bill Gates don't start sucking the benefits that somebody else needs. And the second thing we do, we need to recognize that we live in a different world. People aren't dying at the age of 60 anymore. People are now living till their 80s comfortably and longer.
Which is why they need health care when they're 65.
So we need to make the eligibility age up by about 2 or 3 years.
I would lower the eligibility age to 0 and give all Americans universal health care because Medicare works very well. But I'll tell you this, I do see the outlines of a deal, though.
Medicare is going broke in when?
I see the outlines of I see the outlines of a deal. All we do is make Warren Buffett, we lift the cap on payroll taxes, Warren Buffett pays his fair share, and lo and behold, Medicare can exist for 30, 40 more years.
No deal.
571-749-1166. What's your deal? We'll be right back after.
Too many women get hit by their boyfriends and husbands. Too many women are pressured into having unprotected sex. Half of the people in the world living with AIDS are women. It doesn't have to be this way. Together, we can change this reality. Let's strive for a world free of violence.
At Volunteers of America, we don't just give kids a way to stay off the streets. We give them the tools they need to reach their full potential. We don't just help the elderly receive needed care. We help them live life to the fullest. We don't just provide food for homeless individuals and families. We provide job training and placement so they can buy groceries. Volunteers of America is a national organization that for over 100 years has provided programs and services that allow people to overcome their challenges to become vital members of their community. At Volunteers of America, we don't just help people, we help people help themselves. Find out how you can support the programs that are working in your community. Contact Volunteers of America today. Call 1-800-899-0089.
Drivers face all kinds of distractions.
Guys, stop playing, no?
127 consecutive. Before your wireless phone becomes one of them, stop. Drive safely. Keep your phone in easy reach and dial sensibly. In bad weather or traffic, call later and use a hands-free device. Remember, with wireless, safety is your call.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Mark Levine. So my guest, Republican strategist Mike Lane, and I think, he may disagree, I think we're not far from a deal. I think the idea of having the top 2% pay rates higher than 35 but less than 39.6, capping deductions, I think the idea of perhaps increasing the cap on Medicare so that more money comes in the system from the wealthy. You want to means test it? We'll means test it that way. And Obama's already cut discretionary spending dramatically, more than any president in recent history, as the economy grows. I think we have enough to get past the deal. The one issue left is I don't think that Congress should play with the debt ceiling. I'll get to that one in just a second. Before I get there, though, where am I wrong? Isn't that the outlines of where we're going to end up? Put on your predictor hat rather than your political hat.
The predictor hat is that we're going to kick the can down the road. We're not going to reach a deal. We're going to kick the can down the road. So
you think we're going to go over the cliff?
No, I think we're going to come up with some deal that is a deal to keep going, but not really solving any of the problems. That's what we're going to kick the can down the road.
So the deal would look like, you think we'll continue tax rates? Because I don't think we'll continue these tax rates. That's never going to happen.
Well, I think we do continue the tax rates probably for 6 months, as we kick the can down the road and see what happens.
I don't think that's ever going to happen. Let me talk about the last part of the deal.
If the president wants to drive us into recession for $80 billion a year, simple. I think that's a pretty small way to look at things. We go over the cliff, and then January 2nd, the Democrats offer to cut everybody's taxes. The Republicans refuse to cut everybody's taxes, and then we see the country get very angry at Republicans. We'll give you the same look, Mark.
That will happen if you won't come to a reasonable conclusion.
The history is that presidents own recessions, and no matter what you want to argue or the president wants to spin on this, once we go back into the recession, the president owns it, and that will be his legacy, that he drove the country back into recession. I don't think he wants that legacy.
I don't think
he already has one recession that he extended for 4 years as part of his legacy. Does he want the worst economic presidency in 8 years in the history of the country as his legacy? That's where he's headed.
The American people have already said in the poll that they blame Bush more than Obama for the last 4 years.
Bush is irrelevant.
I agree with them. Not according to the American people. Yeah. You may think so.
You know what?
That's not what the American people think.
Now that you're not spending $1 billion on television,
that's what
blaming somebody else instead of yourself,
I think come January,
it's the president's economy.
I think come January, when the Democrats and the president of the Senate say everybody gets a tax cut, from pauper to millionaire, everybody gets a tax cut, and the Republicans said no, we want everybody's taxes to be high, I actually think the American people will rally, including your party. Republicans will leave your party in droves and say, hey, if you're not going to vote for a tax cut, you're not a Republican. And I think even Grover Norquist may come on our side and say, well, you know what? The Democrats are supporting a tax cut and the Republicans aren't. I guess they're the party of low taxes.
Mark, we're
fine with that if that happens.
One of the strategies that I don't think is going to happen that we're talking about, I don't think it'll happen because it's probably borderline irresponsible. I think so. Is let the president have what he wants. Let's just not filibuster the Senate, and let's just do a vote, and then you own the economy. And if you really
bring it on.
If you really think that $800 billion over 10 years in tax increases and zero spending cuts is a prescription for economic growth and getting us out of the mess that Obama's gotten us into, I'm going to take that bet, and I'm going to come back in 4 years, and we're going to win.
We would love it. And Obama's done more discretionary cuts in spending, far more than George Bush. I'm very proud of that. But here's the thing that I find interesting. Speaking of calling bluffs, on the issue of the debt limit. Now, you know what happened a year and a half ago. Republicans, mostly Tea Party Republicans, threatened.
No, all Republicans. Not just Tea Party. No, I mean.
Fine, all Republicans threatened.
The debt has gotten so out of hand that the debt ceiling is suddenly an issue.
The Republicans threatened to default on the national debt. Now, Lincoln didn't default on the national debt during the Civil War, and we paid back every penny of Revolutionary War debts. But their proposal is to have the United States of America, the strongest, most trusted nation in the world, not only destroy its debt rating for 2013, but for all time, for centuries later, no one would trust America again if the Republicans managed to make sure that we default on our national debt. They are willing to literally destroy the nation's credit and drive us into a worldwide, not recession, depression, rivaling the Great Depression, because China pulls its money out. Suddenly, no one wants to give us money anymore. You would advocate economic devastation. That's what your party wanted. Of course, that had Obama over a barrel because he actually cares about the American people and the economy. So you had him over a barrel. Now, I don't like either party threatening the debt ceiling. I don't like when the Democrats did it. I don't like the Republicans doing it. So President Obama has put forward a plan called the McConnell Plan, because it came from your leader in the Senate, Mitch McConnell. And it says that basically, if Congress says they want to go into debt, in other words, Congress says we want to spend more than we take in, which Congress does all the time, then that happens. They can do a vote to disapprove it based on the debt ceiling, but the president could veto it. And basically, it would require a 2/3 vote of both houses in order to go to that dramatic default. Now, Mitch McConnell thought that the Democrats wouldn't like this either, taking away the congressional perquisite, I guess, to drive us all into this national default. He put it forward on the House floor, daring Democrats to vote for it. And Harry Reid said, fine by us, go ahead, we'll put up for an up or down vote. And immediately Mitch McConnell filibustered his own proposal because he was just bluffing. At the end of the day, shouldn't the debt ceiling not be up for partisan discussion? This is just too scary a weapon for either party to play with.
All right. First of all, I'm glad to say I have no idea what you've been talking about for the last 4 minutes. Absolutely no basis in reality. Look, the debt under Obama in 8 years is going to double what it took us 400 years to build up, okay? The debt ceiling has become exploded into an issue because of what Obama has done with the economy and deficit spending. So no, it's not something you take off the table. It's something that's very, very important. For the first time, it's hugely important, and it's a negotiating thing. The second thing is, no, Republicans never said we weren't going to honor all of our debts. Of course we're going to honor every penny that we owe. What we were saying was, if the president wanted to be irresponsible and not negotiate on spending reductions, then he was going to carry the baggage of forcing the cuts in discretionary spending and perhaps even non-discretionary spending that were going to be used to honor all of our debts. Of course we're going to honor our debts. Every last penny that we borrowed.
The first thing you said contradicts the second thing you said.
No, not at all.
What I said is we should not use the threat not to honor our debts as a bargaining chip. Republicans shouldn't use it. Democrats shouldn't use it.
Nobody
we should always honor our debts.
And we absolutely will.
So
There's
Obama's
no chance.
proposal is to say that we will always honor our debts unless 2/3 of both houses of Congress, he wants to make this part of legislation, that we will always honor our debts unless 2/3 of both houses of Congress disagree. That protects Republicans and Democrats from the threat of default.
No,
that
Mark,
sounds like a good plan to me, and Mitch McConnell is the one who thought it up.
If the debt ceiling,
I'm all for it.
If the debt ceiling doesn't get raised, we still honor and pay every last cent of our debts. Every last cent. That goes first, and discretionary spending and other things get cut to honor our debts. Nobody is talking about defaulting on our debts, perhaps other than you and the president. I don't know why the president would think that would be a good thing. Nobody's talking about that.
If we don't have the money to do it, we can't.
We do have the money to do it.
We can't pay our interest.
We do have the money. We take it out of other spending is what we do. It's that simple.
It can't be done.
It can be done. It can be done. Look,
we would have to go into default.
Mark, the interest on the debt is only 40 to 45% of what we are of what we spend during the course of the year.
So you're advocating
so that 45% gets spent first.
Not paying the military. Not paying Social Security.
I'm advocating paying our debts, as every Republican is advocating paying our debts.
All right. But you don't support a proposal to take this off the table.
You know, my Constitution says that the Congress is responsible for incurring debt, not the president. So I don't know how the president would do that. You know, it's another unconstitutional power grab by Obama, and we've had it with that. Done.
My Constitution says, the 14th Amendment, Section 4, quote, The validity of the public debt of the United States authorized by law shall not be questioned. Congress authorized this debt. They said we're spending this much and we're taxing too little.
The debt,
and so I don't question it.
The debt is authorized by a vote to increase the debt limit. It's not. The debt is not authorized by spending.
Of course it is.
No, it's not. No,
we didn't
it's
even have a
not.
debt limit until the 20th century.
Mark,
the first 150 years of American history or so, they simply voted their spending and their taxes.
Come on.
Let's talk about another change.
The Congress is responsible for it, and the president is not going to do an unconstitutional power grab.
I don't think that the threat of default should be up for discussion.
The threat of default is not up for discussion. It's never up for discussion. We will always pay 100% of our obligated debt.
Why? If we have a debt ceiling, the president can do whatever he wants, right?
No,
I mean,
the president
you could say fire everyone in the military, don't pay anyone in the military.
If the
don't
president wants to walk us over that cliff, then that's his choice. But
no, to me, if we get to that point, the president needs to invoke the 14th Amendment and say, you know what, we're going to pay all our debts, and if you don't like it, Supreme Court tell us not to.
Okay.
Let me talk about something else we can do.
I think the court will.
Filibusters in the Senate. There's no provision in this Constitution anywhere about a filibuster. It ain't here.
Not that I know of.
The Senate shall set its own rules.
Correct.
Each house shall set its own rules.
Correct.
It says. And in fact, the filibuster used to be an extremely rare thing. It was almost never used. There may be 1 or 2 times in a Congress. The Republican Congress, since 2009, has made it as if the filibuster means that the Senate requires 60 votes to do anything. They even say things. You have to do 60 votes to do anything in the Senate. That was never the law, and they've made it the law. And this kind of supermajority.
It's a rule of the Senate. It's not a law at all. There's no law.
Exactly. It's a rule of the Senate that needs to be changed. Now, one of the things that Harry Reid has offered to do is really something very minimal. Frankly, I wish he'd go farther. I would abolish most of the filibuster. I'd keep it only for things like judicial nominations and other lifetime appointments. But what he said is, we're not abolishing the filibuster. But if you want a filibuster, get up and speak. Do a little Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Speak all night. Use some air power if you really care strongly enough. Read from the phone book. Do whatever you do. Do it old style. And he also wants to take away the filibuster to the filibuster. The idea that you can filibuster twice. There was a motion to proceed and then a motion to vote. He says, you know what? If you want a filibuster, it should be 1 vote of cloture, not 2. 1 vote to overturn the filibuster. These seem to be very reasonable reforms to me. But Mitch McConnell is dead set against both of them.
Well, first of all, you're right. The filibuster is used more today than it was in the past. The filibuster, the history of the filibuster, the reason for the filibuster is to allow the minority to stop, if you will, the majority from railroading through only the most egregious and out of the mainstream kinds of things. And because Barack Obama and Harry Reid are so egregiously out of the mainstream and far left, that is why the filibuster has become more and more actively used.
That's why it's used every single time.
Because
you want to name a post office, that's too egregious. We have to filibuster it.
Nobody's filibustered a post office, and you know it.
They are filibustering everything.
Because
the
president is so far out of the mainstream in terms of what he proposes that, Mark,
if we do not reform the filibuster,
if
we do not reform the filibuster, a Republican president will never be able to accomplish anything because the Democrats will learn from these Republican obstructionist tactics, and they will require 60 votes for everything, and you'll never get anything done.
You know what? The way they avoided filibusters in the past was they worked together bipartisanly.
That would be great.
And they came to agreement before something was brought to the floor.
And if you didn't have the party of no, we could do that.
Harry Reid took bipartisan negotiations and threw them out the window and said, it's going to be my way or the highway, and we are doing this on the Democrats' terms. And the Republicans say,
you can rewrite history all you want. Mitch McConnell said, I don't give a damn about the economy. I want to defeat Obama as president. That's my first priority. I'm going to screw over everything the Democrats do. He said that 2 months after Barack Obama was president. I hope he speaks better.
I will agree with you. We need to bring in the cops and make them talk all night because that was what it was all about.
You know what? On that we agree.
Yes.
All right, we're going to cut to foreign policy when we come back.
Around the world, 1 out of every 3 women will be beaten or otherwise abused in their lifetime, often by a family member or loved one. A future free from violence. It's all she's ever wished for.
Do Did you know you have the power to stop children from joining gangs? You can help a father find a job and home for his family. You can assist a woman who can't afford the medicine she needs to live and the home she can't live without. You can choose to make a difference in our community. Support Volunteers of America, and you can help improve the lives of nearly 2 million Americans each year with programs and services that help individuals and families overcome their challenges to become as independent as possible. Support the programs that are working in our community. Contact Volunteers of America today. Call 1-800-899-0089.
For some folks, saving for the future is easy, but for you, it might take a little more effort. Saving for your future is your responsibility, and there's a lot to save for.
I never thought of that.
Like your child's education, perhaps uncovered medical expenses, or just to be sure you can live the way you want when you retire. The time is now to save for tomorrow. Save now or work forever. The choice is yours. Choose.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. This is Mark Levine. This is your last chance to call in, by the way, if you want to join in the discussion. We'd love to hear from you. 571-749-1166. My guest is Republican strategist Mike Lane. Well, we've had our battles, but we've come to a few agreements. One thing we both like is the speaking filibuster. If you're going to obstruct the business of the Senate, have the heart to go all night and sleep in a cot and read the phone books. And Strom Thurmond, famously in 1957, was filibustering the civil rights laws, and he talked for about 14, 15, 16 hours, and the poor man had to go to the bathroom. And because of that, we have civil rights. So I say we need the old speaking filibuster. It should be tough to obstruct the business of the United States Senate.
Well, I think your first model was actually the right one, Jimmy Stewart. You know, a great role model,
there you go.
Great American. And a good Republican.
I actually, well, I don't know if he was Republican.
Jimmy Stewart was as Republican as it gets.
The Republican Party was reasonable in those days. That doesn't mean anything. Look, at the end of the day, I am not against the idea of having some minority rights in the Senate. I'm really not. But the Republicans have so misused the filibuster. That's why Democrats are crying for filibuster
Mark,
reform.
If you would negotiate with us first instead of trying to ram it through, there wouldn't be the filibusters. Let's come to bipartisan agreement before you bring things to the floor, and things will go through.
The Republicans have filibustered more in Obama's first term than every Congress in every part of American history.
Obama is so far out of the mainstream.
Together, that's ridiculous.
And Harry Reid refuses to negotiate.
That's ridiculous.
You know,
that's also ridiculous.
How many in 4 years?
The Democrats didn't support the Bush tax cuts, and what did he do? He rammed it through. He used reconciliation, and that's why they're expiring today.
In 4 years, I have a question. How many times has Harry Reid in 4 years called Mitch McConnell up and said, "Mitch, bring a bottle of Maker's Mark over to my office after hours tonight, and let's sit down and talk about the next month and what we can accomplish together"?
Harry Reid's a Mormon, so I don't think
it hasn't happened yet.
I don't think he's drinking Maker's Mark because he's Mormon. But look, it'd be nice if they would work together. It'd be nice if Mitch McConnell hadn't said that
Harry Reid hasn't called him.
The destruction of the president was his first priority, and helping Americans was his second priority.
Not the destruction of the president. Making him a one-term president.
Making him a one-term president.
And he said he hoped he would succeed, but not on his terms. He did say that.
Let's move on. I want to quickly address, before we move on to foreign policy, the United States Supreme Court has some very important cases coming before it. One is on the Defense of Marriage Act. The other is on California's Proposition 8. It is my prediction it's going to be close, but it's my prediction it'll be a 5-4 vote with Justice Kennedy joining the 4 liberals to say that the federal government has no right to define marriage. That is a state right, and if a state says that you're married, then you're married under federal law too. If Maryland says gay people are married, they're married under federal law too. If Idaho says gay people are not married, they're not married under federal law. But there's nowhere in this Constitution that says the federal government can define marriage. The Defense of Marriage Act is unconstitutional. What do you think?
I think this has the possibility of coming down almost any which way. I don't.
It all depends on Justice Kennedy, actually.
No, I don't.
Possibly Roberts too.
I don't think it's necessarily a 5-4 vote. I think
Roberts could conceivably join with Kennedy,
and I think you'll see.
All 4 liberals will say that these laws are unconstitutional. No question about that.
I think this is unpredictable, and people have gone broke predicting what the Supreme Court's going to do. I was the only one I knew who said I wasn't going to say what I thought they were going to do on Obamacare, and
I said they would uphold it as constitutional, and I was correct.
The point is, predicting the Supreme Court is an industry that's ripe for going broke.
This Constitution doesn't allow Congress to define marriage, does it? I mean, it's a state right. I mean, states have been defining marriage for 200 some odd years. You're all about states' rights. That's not a federal thing.
You and I have had the opportunity to debate in other forums other than this one where you've heard me go publicly that it's a state issue, not a federal issue.
Right, so we agree on that. Glad to hear it. All right, let me move on to foreign policy. The two main countries of interest are Egypt and Syria, though, of course, there's all kinds of goings-on in the Middle East. Let's start with Syria, actually, because 40,000 people are dead. I've long advocated, and I've criticized the president, frankly, for not acting in Syria. The president has said Assad has to go. I'd like him to do more than words. He has said, I'm glad he said, that the United States will take action if Assad uses chemical weapons.
I don't think he actually said that.
Well, he implied it.
He said there will be
consequences.
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 Right. He said there'll be consequences.
So he may not even go that far, but at least hopefully that will persuade Assad not to use chemical weapons. Of course, Assad, with conventional arms, is doing pretty good at killing a lot of innocent men, women, and children. What's different now is the rebels are starting to win. They're starting to control large swaths of Syria. They're not yet conquering Aleppo or Damascus, but they're close. I would predict, frankly, in 3-4 months, the rebels will take over the lion's share of Syria. Here's my fear. My fear is because we didn't help Syria, because we didn't, and I wasn't ever advocating troops. As you know, I was advocating a no-fly zone and arms. Pretty much what we did in Libya is what I was advocating. But my fear is this, because we're not helping them enough, I fear that Al-Qaeda and other extremist elements, the same reason I won't say you've been, I won't pick on you, but many Democrats and Republicans have said we can't help them because there are a few extremist elements in the Syrian Free Army. I think by not helping the people we want to help, the people who are fighting for a democratic Syria, it actually helps the extremists. Just like we found in Libya, they're good guys and bad guys, and they can be on the same side fighting the dictator. If we don't arm the good guys, then the Al-Qaeda-like people tend to have more arms, more power, and Syria will end up in far worse anarchy than if we'd actually gone in. So my argument is, the arguments against us helping is that it would lead to anarchy. I think we get more anarchy if we don't help.
You're confusing me with my twin brother.
Okay.
I have been in favor of intervention in Syria.
Glad to hear it.
For 18 months ago,
okay.
I thought was the right time.
I did too.
That was when the resistance forces, when the opposition forces were true opposition forces and true reformers.
Right.
The problem now, and I was also in favor of a no-fly zone at that point. Back when we were arguing over, oh my God, there's been 1,000 innocent people killed,
I remember
as opposed to 40,000 people killed.
I remember that.
Now, of course, Al-Qaeda has come in. They are commingled with the forces.
You almost can't blame them when 40,000 people are dying. They're looking for anybody.
If we give weapons to the opposition forces at this point, we don't really know who's going to get them or what's going to happen with them or anything like that. We're talking about putting them through Qatar and putting them through Saudi Arabia and having them give so that they come from Arab countries, wink, wink, nod, nod, which is not a bad thing to do.
First of all, that's already happening. Okay, now Saudi Arabia and Qatar are already getting weapons.
But it's not the big stuff that we're talking about now, really going in and playing the hand. If it may be too late, that not too late for the rebels to win, it may be too late for us to get credit because other people have been there and we haven't been there.
Well, I'm sorry about that. I'll tell you.
And as I said, Al-Qaeda and the other terrorist groups are already there in large numbers now, not in small numbers, and they're already commingled with all the legitimate opposition forces. And how do you control who gets these arms? We can work with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and say, we want you to make sure that these things only go to the real opposition forces. How do you do that? You don't.
Well, you're right.
We are giving real weaponry to the terrorists when we do this.
You're right that they're there now. You're also right that they're far more. They weren't there 18 months ago.
No, they weren't.
They are there now. I think, though, you'd agree with me that they're still not the majority of the opposition. They're not the majority of the rebels. Obama and Secretary of State Clinton have worked hard to designate a free Syrian government that's already been recognized by the French.
But not by us.
But not by us. And we should recognize them. I absolutely think we should recognize them.
This week.
And I as soon as possible.
This week.
As soon as possible.
I believe it'll happen Wednesday.
And I think what we need to do is direct arms to them. And some may get to the bad guys. Listen, in Libya, Let's face it, there were bad guys. Ansar al-Shari militia, the one that killed our heroes in Benghazi, was one of the bad guys in Libya. That doesn't mean the Libyan aid was a mistake. It means that in helping a whole bunch of Libyan people, some arms got to the bad guys. That's unfortunately the way it's always going to be. But at the end of the day, if we don't help the good guys, people will remember Al-Qaeda was there, Al-Qaeda defeated Assad, Al-Qaeda gets credit for the victory. It is late. It should have been done earlier. I still say better late than never.
It's a very tough call. I'm going to come in on your side that it's
better late than never.
It's important. Better late than never, but boy, would it have been nicer about 18 months ago.
I agree with you. Now let me move on to Egypt, where I think there's more disagreement. Egypt is a fascinating thing going on. I think that some on the right are proclaiming that Morsi, Muslim Brotherhood, he's a terrorist, he's just as bad as Al-Qaeda and so forth. And there's some on the left who say, well, Morsi, he's an elected president, he's a good guy, leave him alone. I've always been in the middle of those two positions. I do not think Morsi is Hezbollah or Hamas or Al-Qaeda. I think he's someone who cares about Egypt and wants it to succeed and can be practical when he needs to be. But I don't think he's a wonderful Democrat who certainly there's no question from his decrees. This is a guy who wants to take power and wants to be a dictator if he can get it by. What I find so amazing and so wonderful, and the real heroes in this, it's not Morsi, and it certainly isn't the old Mubarak folks. It's the people of Egypt, those students who are massing in Tahrir Square and ordinary people who are saying, you know what, we don't want Mubarak the dictator, and we don't want Morsi the dictator. And they got him to back down. Now, he backed down off his decree. There's still going to be the referendum. We're not sure where he's going to go. But the thing I like the most, not just that Morsi was able to work with the United States in helping Israel and end the conflict in Gaza there, that he wasn't just on the side of Hamas. He was willing to work with us and work with Israel. I really liked that. But I also liked that the Egyptian people, when Morsi did overreach and he did try to grab power, they made him back down. That maybe I've always been a bit of an optimist, but that gives me some hope.
You're too much of an optimist. Morsi is as bad as the people who say he's really bad is. He is a terrorist. He showed his true colors by issuing his Pharaoh for life decree. He did work this is a guy
with Israel to stop the war with Hamas. He didn't invade Israel. I mean, he doesn't want to end that peace treaty. He's not as bad as you might think.
It was the wrong time to invade Israel. If he thought he could have gotten away with it, he would have done it.
So he's biding his time.
It wasn't the right time. He's not stupid.
No, he's not stupid.
But he is a terrorist. He is a thug. He is a Muslim Brotherhood guy. He is an Islamist, and he is part of the dream of the Islamic Caliphate,
and yet
going
he backed
all across
down. When the people amassed in Tahrir Square,
he
rescinded his Pharaoh for life decree, as you put it. That's a good name for it. And he withdrew. He's actually I'm not saying he doesn't want all power. I think he does. My point is that the people of Egypt, at least for now, can tame him, and that's a good sign.
He did withdraw it. Let's see if he really withdrew it. Just because you announce you withdrew it doesn't mean that you're not going to behave that way. And the thing that really concerns me is that, he was really upset at the old judges that were left over from the previous regime.
Right.
But he was not really upset about the military commanders. He fired them all and replaced them with his personal loyalists, so the military is no longer independent. Now the military
not only that, but
is personally beholden to Morsi, and that is a very bad thing.
And under the new Egyptian constitution, he's giving the military even more power. But to me, there is still a precedent, and that is that people throughout the Arab world know that when they have a bad leader, they can go in and they can come into the streets, and let's hope at least that can continue.
I'm not hopeful that you're right, but I hope you are right.
There you go. Thanks for coming on the show, Mike. I always enjoy discussing with you. I don't know that I'll see you before the holidays, so have a Merry Christmas.
And tonight's the third night of Hanukkah?
It is the third night of Hanukkah. And we also want to wish a happy Kwanzaa and a happy New Year, whatever you celebrate. I hope that you have a good time this holiday season. Find out more about the Inside